Journal entry. 12th day of Eliath, age of Surak, 2841. With the conclusion of this semester, I plan to depart to the Shakir Highlands. There I shall meditate. Even I have become troubled of late, as have my students. I had intended today's seminar as an evaluation of the T'Pau Reformation, yet my students quickly shifted the discourse to that of the war. It would have been illogical to try and bring them back on topic. Many of their contemporaries have joined Starfleet. For them to be concerned is logical. They asked as to my own perspective and experience on the current conflict. They asked, would not the needs of the many who will die be better served by capitulation? I tried to explain to them that logic is merely the beginning of wisdom. I explained that while I acknowledge the suffering of the many today, I believe that the needs of the many generations who would go on to live under Dominion tyranny outweigh our own. We suffer not for our own benefit, but for the infinity that shall inherit the world we create. By mid-February of 2374, the Federation was in full retreat against the relentless Dominion onslaught, losing system after system. While this strategy was extremely demoralizing, it kept the fleets alive and brought Starfleet valuable time to mobilize a defense. This strategy was most successfully employed by Fleet Groups Center and South, which managed to put almost an entire sector between themselves and the advancing Dominion. While it won them much ridicule from friend and foe alike, it was a strategic success and allowed Starfleet to gather its forces and prepare defences, so that they could face the Dominion on their own terms. One of these places was the Nibia system. A historic Vulcan colony since before the formation of the Federation, it was once the farthest outpost of Vulcan space, but by the 24th century was considered a core system. Known for its many moons which play host to colonies, it was deemed a suitable position for the Third Fleet under Admiral Talara to hold back the oncoming Dominion storm. With a dense system of moons around the Nibian gas giants, and the thermobaric clouds between the inner and outer planets, as well as numerous long-range sensors and telescopes, the Nibia system granted a significant advantage to any defending force. And by March 10th, the Dominion had once again closed the gap, advancing to Aurolio Prime and Babel. The Third Fleet was now engaged by both a Jem'Hadar fleet and the Cardassian Fifth Order, and on March 14th, the Dominion made their move, with a joint Cardassian Dominion fleet advancing on Nibia. Seeing them coming thanks to their long-range telescopes, Admiral Talara decided to hit the attackers first, sending her light battle group to intercept the incoming Cardassian division, while holding the rest of her ships back to repel the Jem'Hadar. The light battle group, under Vice Admiral Siran, engaged the Cardassians at 0223, facing down 35 Cardassian ships with 32 of his own. The two formations charged headlong towards one another at maximum warp, exchanging a brutal torpedo volley as they passed one another. In the ensuing chaos, 5 Cardassian ships and 4 Federation ships were knocked out of warp. With neither side gaining a decisive advantage, both swung round for another pass, with the Thunderchild wing first to get back into arc, followed closely by the Cardassian Rysalax, but this time Starfleet was able to gain the advantage, knocking 12 Cardassians out of warp while only losing 6 of their own. With that, the Cardassians turned tail. Siran turned loose his Cheyenne wing to keep up the pursuit, while his remaining ships spread out to find any Cardassian stragglers, successfully tracking down and disabling 6 Cardassian ships. Meanwhile, Admiral Talara was busy greeting the Jem'Hadar, who arrived at the edge of the system with 50 ships spreading out across the outer planet in order to reconnoitre Talara's defences. As they did so, Talara put her plan into action, with 2 attack wings emerging from the clouds of Nibia 8 and engaging the Jem'Hadar fighters. Despite having the element of surprise, the attack wings found the Jem'Hadar to be an elusive enemy. The Jem'Hadar split off into small groups and began skimming the surface of the moons to avoid Starfleet. Yet Commodore Yeager was undeterred, following with his Sabre squadron, flying to within 50 meters of the lunar surface and one by one knocking out the Jem'Hadar. Elsewhere, the second Jem'Hadar group moved towards the thermobaric clouds. Rather than expose themselves to whatever could be waiting on the other side, they launched probes into the cloud. In response, a frigate wing, along with a pair of Oberths, emerged from the clouds and engaged the Jem'Hadar. With numbers on his side, the Vorta was confident he could drive them off, turning his second cruiser to engage. Yet as he did so, a volley of 16 torpedoes emerged from the cloud and managed to strike the Jem'Hadar, even though the shooter ought to have been firing blind, destroying 4 fighters and heavily damaging his cruiser. With no way to reply to this obscured enemy, the Vorta withdrew. Meanwhile, Yeager continued to outmaneuver and outwit the elusive Jem'Hadar. Using the gravity of Nibia's moons, he was able to slingshot his ships to intercept and cut off the smaller, more nimble Jem'Hadar. And by 0943, the Jem'Hadar had fully retreated from the system. Even so, Talara was under no illusion. This attack had merely been a reconnaissance, intended to test her defences, and they would now have to face the full force of a Dominion attack. She would not have long to wait. On March 19th, Talara's scouts reported a large Dominion fleet massing between Aurelio Prime and Babel, with 80 Jem'Hadar ships and the entire Cardassian Fifth Order. With her defences prepared as best she could, she'd ordered her battle groups to form up. Talara deployed her fleet in 2 parts, with a thin front line deployed between the thermobaric cloud and Nibia 6. However, her main strength was concealed within the thermobaric cloud, including her fire support wings, which would still be able to fire thanks to the AWACS ships deployed within the front lines, which would be able to designate targets. Also concealed within the cloud were some of her most elite units, including a Galaxy Wing, which she held back either as a defensive reserve, but hopefully as the principal means of a counterattack. Upon entering the system, Legate Rukar saw Talara's position and recognized it for the facade it was. He also deduced from his recon reports that she was hiding her base of fire in the thermobaric clouds and relying on her AWACS ships for targeting, which were currently positioned behind the line of cruisers. Therefore, he ordered an assault on the centre to flush them out into the open where his destroyers could pick them off. The Galor lines at the front of the 2 columns took the brunt of the bombardment. Despite these losses, the Cardassians closed to CQB and began pummeling the center cruiser wings as they breached the line. This had the predicted effect, driving the AWACS to the flanks, where they were set upon by the Cardassian destroyers. Meanwhile, the Dominion continued to drive through Talara's center, and many of her officers urged her to commit the Galaxy Wing. Instead, she ordered her battle groups to fall back to the other side of the cloud, and she ordered the Galaxy Wing to redeploy within the cloud. Rukar saw the Federation retreat and proceeded with caution, first sending his recon divisions through the cloud, who then reported that the Federation had redeployed on the far side. Rukar ordered the Jem'Hadar through to draw their fire, while his own artillery divisions took up positions inside the clouds. After a few minutes of softening up the Federation line from his concealed position, Rukar was ready to deal the killing blow, ordering his Jem'Hadar into a spearhead, followed by his 2 battle divisions. Now, with her enemy committed to an overwhelming attack, Talar ordered her support wings to open fire, striking the Dominion far beyond conventional range thanks to spotting from the remaining AWACS. Meanwhile, in the gas cloud, the Cardassian artillery division was suddenly set upon by Galaxy-class ships which had been hiding in the cloud. The artillery division was quickly broken. The Galaxy wing then burst through the clouds and hit the rear of the Dominion spearhead. This, combined with the long-range enfilading fire, was more than enough to break Rukar's nerve, and he ordered a hasty retreat, handing victory to Admiral Talara. While the crews were elated, having successfully stood their ground, Talara knew that the Dominion would be back, and this time she would not have an ace up her sleeve. And on the 22nd of March, the Dominion did respond, though not in the way she expected. Instead, she received word that the First Fleet had been overrun at Denobula and was now being driven back towards Huaytan. As a result, all fleets beyond Sector X1 Alpha were ordered to fall back, lest they be caught behind enemy lines. And so, despite having stood her ground, Talara was forced yet again to fall back, retiring to the Berengaria system, leaving the defence of her home in the hands of others. With the success of the Tantalus offensive, the Dominion now surrounded the 6th Fleet at Andoria on 3 sides. They had also passed the Vulcan border, taking Nibia, Basari and the major colony of Regulus essentially without a fight. The Dominion, fully aware of the strong fortifications surrounding Andoria and even the stronger resolve of those committed to defend her, concluded that the most efficient course of action would be simply to bypass Andoria altogether and cut it off from the rest of the Federation. In order to do so, the Dominion planned to take the systems of Huaytan and Epsilon Eridani, which would not only render Andoria surrounded, but would open the door to strike Vulcan itself and deal a mortal blow to the Federation. The Huaytan system, now guarded by the displaced First Fleet under Admiral Bullock, resides halfway between Vulcan and Andoria, and before the formation of the Federation was a site of many skirmishes. It had blossomed into a major trading colony and crossroads, and as a result, it lacked any real fortifications, since to do so would bring about unnecessary tensions between Vulcan and Andoria. But it also left Admiral Bullock with little to work with. By contrast, the 12th Fleet under Admiral Salok enjoyed a far stronger position at Epsilon Eridani. As a historic Vulcan colony, the system was well developed and played host to a major shipyard, and as such was well fortified, which was fortunate since the 12th Fleet was generally composed of older, more antiquated vessels with more inexperienced crews. In any case, both fleets were now in the Dominion's sights, who set about planning the next phase of their offensive. By April 2nd, patrols from both the 1st and 12th Fleet reported Dominion reconnaissance units closing in on their respective systems. With this intelligence in hand, the overall Dominion commander in the sector, Gultar Jazar, opted for a bold strategy. Recognizing that if he were to only attack one fleet, battle groups from the neighbouring fleet would move to support, and so his only option would be a simultaneous attack on both fleets, with a joint force from a Jem'Hadar fleet and the Cardassian 5th and 11th Orders engaging the 12th Fleet at Eridani, while the other joint fleet, comprising of the Jem'Hadar fleet and elements of the 4th and 6th Orders, engaged the 1st Fleet at Huaytan. Their objective was to fix the 12th Fleet at Eridani so that it could not support the 1st. With the 1st isolated, they would then drive them from Huaytan, then turn downward to overwhelm the 12th Fleet and capture Epsilon Eridani. His plan was set into motion on the 8th of April, as a Cardassian force of over 300 small fighters and bombers conducted a raid against the defences in the Eridani system, attacking the phaser and torpedo turrets, which, while formidable against large starships, were defenceless against small fighters. Only by the courage of a few local defence fighters and a handful of Starfleet pilots were the Cardassians driven off, but at that point they had succeeded in creating a gap in the system's defences, allowing the Dominion the foothold they needed. And less than 8 hours later, over 180 Dominion ships entered the system, pouring into the defensive blind spot. Admiral Salok was quick to respond, deploying his fleet around the gap, containing the Dominion for the time being, though this was only thanks to the weapons platforms, and it was by no means certain, as a few light years away, the First Fleet had been engaged. Recognizing that the system of Huitan offered no tactical advantage in itself, Admiral Bullock elected to face the Dominion in deep space. Outnumbered, he divided his force into 4 battle groups, hoping the Dominion would do the same, and in so doing, commit to a series of smaller engagements in which his more advanced vessels would have an advantage. Not wishing to allow the First Fleet to escape, Gultar Jazar split his fleet into 4, outnumbering the Federation 2-1. He was confident that he could overwhelm Bullock and then turn on Eridani. The first unit to be engaged was Battle Group Equestrius. They were engaged by 60 Dominion ships. Despite this, Vice Admiral Savar was able to take control of the engagement. Making use of his ship's superior speed and agility, he was able to evade the larger cruisers and instead only faced the smaller enemy attack ships and destroyers. The Vorta, realizing that his numbers were being whittled away, ordered his ships to regroup, hoping that his comrades might have success elsewhere and then turn to support him. And indeed, for Battle Group Izar under Vice Admiral Nechayev, turning tail with her heavy cruisers and Galaxy-class battleships was not an option. Instead, she would have to face whatever the Dominion sent her way head-on, including not only the Jem'Hadar battlecruisers, but also the heavy battle lines of the Sixth Order. Nechayev ordered the battle group to form line and engage the enemy at long range. Knowing that they would be at a disadvantage in such an exchange, the Dominion attempted to cut Nechayev off, crossing her T. Seeing the Dominion battlecruisers attempting to cut her off, she ordered the USS Enterprise to lead their cruisers ahead of the line and intercept the Jem'Hadar. As the Enterprise did so, Nechayev brought her galaxies round to port, closing with the Cardassian battle lines. Without the Dominion cruisers, the Cardassians were outgunned and began to take losses. The battlecruisers, now cut off by Enterprise, were unable to regroup with the Cardassians, and instead punched through the cruiser line and cut down the starboard side of Nechayev's battleships, doing heavy damage. Yet this would cost the Dominion, as Nechayev brought her ships round hard to starboard, forming a crescent around the battlecruisers, obliterating them from 3 sides. At the same time, Enterprise cut down the port side of the Cardassian line, with the Akiras issuing a brutal broadside of torpedoes. With their Dominion support destroyed and taking heavy losses, the remaining Cardassians withdrew, freeing Nechayev to support her comrades. Meanwhile, at Epsilon Eridani, cracks were beginning to form in Salok's line as the Dominion phalanx began to inexorably edge forward and Salok's casualties began to mount. He was finding it increasingly difficult to plug the gaps in his line, allowing Cardassian fighters and skirmishers through the line to attack the weapon platforms, steadily undermining and compromising his position. With his line stretched increasingly thin, Salok's center became vulnerable and he was faced with 2 options: divide his forces among the remaining weapons platforms and create pockets of resistance in key areas, or regroup and fall back to a more defensive position. Salok opted for the latter, retreating to the outskirts of the shipyards at Eridani 5, the remaining platforms slowing the Dominion pursuit, buying Salok more time for reinforcements to arrive. Yet there was no guarantee that they would be friendly, as while Nechayev had succeeded in routing the Dominion, some of her comrades had not been so successful, and as a result, neither side had gained a decisive advantage. Rather than fly to support Battle Group Archer on the flank, which appeared to be wavering, Nechayev instead turned to support the other 2 battle groups, which were still in relatively good order. First, she linked up with Battle Group Tempest, which had been surviving by carrying out long-range hit-and-run attacks against the superior Dominion force, but with Nechayev's support, they were able to retake the initiative. The strung-out Dominion ships were unprepared for the ships of Izar, with Enterprise leading the charge, followed by Nechayev's Galaxy Wing. They quickly overwhelmed the Dominion, with the firepower of the Galaxies being too much for the Cardassians. This gave Admiral Bullock the decisive advantage he needed. The two battle groups split off, with Izar moving to support Equestris and Tempest to rescue Archer before moving to reinforce Eridani, which they now learned was under attack. Yet time was running out. While Salok had shortened his lines, this had the secondary effect of conceding maneuvering room to the Dominion, who were able to attack from multiple vectors and avoid Salok's strong points. Yet with their fighter complements now depleted, the Dominion would have to engage the defense turrets head-on, slowing their progress as they cautiously and methodically moved their artillery lines to destroy each individual battle cluster. Yet in doing so, their own artillery lines took heavy casualties. As a result, the Dominion commander concluded that it would be foolhardy to push on without reinforcements, and so withdrew to Epsilon Eridani 11, which they had captured in their initial advance. Having taken heavy casualties, Salok did not give chase and awaited reinforcements, as did the Dominion. And so, when battlegroups Izar and Equestris arrived on April 10th, Salok knew he would have to go on the attack before Dominion reinforcements arrived, before they launched another attack on Waytarn. And so at 1422, he launched a massive attack, hoping to drive the Dominion from the system, yet all he got was 23 ships destroyed to no avail, allowing the Dominion to reinforce Eridani 11, and they would soon after launch another attack on the shipyards, with both sides taking heavy casualties, but the Dominion were once again repelled. For the next 7 days, this pattern persisted, with the Dominion launching attack after attack on both Waytarn and Epsilon Eridani, causing heavy casualties on both sides. Battles erupted among the various stations and starbases of Eridani, as Cardassian and Jem'Hadar troops attempted to seize control, but were unable to break the resolve of their steadfast Vulcan defenders. Until on April 17th, the 12th Fleet was recalled to Starbase 375, leaving Eridani to be covered between the 1st and 14th Fleet, while Salok would lead his fleet on a vital mission. Though difficult with their forces spread so thin, the 1st and 14th Fleet successfully held on to Eridani, and by April 22nd, they received a cryptic message: returned. Obeying his orders, Bullock and Doughty both pushed towards Dominion positions and found them undefended. Realizing what this meant, both fleets gave chase, keeping their sword at the Dominion's back, driving them from Vulcan space, liberating Basari, chasing them from the moons of Nibia and out of the core of the Federation itself. The siege of Vulcan cost Starfleet over 120 ships and some 45,000 lives, while the Dominion lost over 200 ships and 65,000 personnel, most of whom were Cardassian, during the 39 days of fighting. It is therefore darkly poetic that such a brutal battle was fought to defend a world ravaged by war in eons gone by, a world so scarred that it spawned a stoic and pacifist people whose commitment to this precept often outweighed their commitments of friendship. And yet, for the first time in 200 years, they had broken with this cherished ideal and taken up arms alongside their allies. And in so doing, they would share the same fate, with millions of Vulcans going on to lose their lives in the fires of this ever-growing war. The revered Vulcan scholar, Tarak, would then later write, "When our people committed to this war, they made an irreversible choice: to sacrifice the needs of the present for the needs of the future. Yet in doing so, we were forced to sacrifice more than we realized." I do not speak of the 10 million Vulcans who lost their lives, for that was the logical consequence of our defiance. Rather, I refer to that very conception that such death can be reduced to a matter of logic. Was that truly Suruk's intention, that we regard war as a matter of calculation? If not, then we have stepped beyond the bounds of Suruk's teaching. Logic is no longer sufficient. Instead, we must look to our lost cousins who, despite their warlike nature, would never regard such death with the cold indifference of logic. I believe that we have set down a path which our people can no longer travel alone.